Welcome to Paranormal Nightshift, your home for everything that goes bump in the dark, and your fan stories told right here. Today's story comes from Philip, and it is titled Firehouse Encounter. Before we dive into tonight's chilling tale, I've got a message for my fellow time travelers. Are you ready to take your paranormal adventures to the next level? Need more spine-tingling mysteries and time-bending thrills? Then listen up. By joining the Paranormal Nightshift Patreon, you'll unlock exclusive perks like early ad-free access to episodes. That's right. Skip this very ad you're hearing now and jump straight into the eerie unknown without interruptions. But that's just the beginning. Patreon members also get first access to our ebook series, Paranormal Time Traveler. Follow our fearless investigator as they journey back through time to uncover spine-chilling, listener-inspired mysteries. It's a supernatural adventure inspired by you, our amazing Nightshifters. Don't forget, new episodes of Paranormal Nightshift drop every Monday and Friday evening, with surprise episodes popping up when you least expect them. So stay tuned, stay curious, and don't miss a single twist in the story. Ready to join the Paranormal Nightshift family? Head to patreon.com/paranormalnightshift or click the link in the description. Step into the unknown with us, because every moment is just the beginning of the journey. Now, let's get back to tonight's story. Let me take you back to that night, one that felt like any other night in a long line of shifts, but left me with a memory burned as deep as any scar. I'd been a firefighter and EMT for nearly 12 years, long enough to become well acquainted with the chaos that seemed to gravitate toward certain places and people. I'd had a few unexplainable experiences in my past, sure, but I'd dismiss them as tricks of an ADHD-riddled imagination or just the byproduct of high-stress situations. But nothing I'd seen, heard, or thought could have prepared me for what happened that night. It was well past midnight when the call came in. The house, an old two-story structure on the edge of town, had gone up in flames. Abandoned for as long as anyone could remember, it had become a notorious spot, attracting squatters, drug deals, and meth cooks. We'd all been to that house at least a couple of times for different reasons: medical calls for overdoses, complaints from neighbors. It was the kind of place you got to know just because it was always on someone's radar. The house had earned itself a bit of a reputation over the years. Neighbors had whispered stories about it being haunted or even possessed, but we had always brushed that talk aside. We had enough to worry about with real flesh-and-blood problems. Tonight, though, something felt different. As soon as we arrived, we could see that the fire had taken hold fiercely. The flames were already licking up the sides of the house, turning the rotten old wood into charcoal and smoke in minutes. It was no surprise that the place went up like kindling. The building was half-rotted with gaping holes in the floors and walls. The stairs looked like they'd collapse under the weight of a feather, and the stench inside was like a cocktail of mold, old urine, and something sour, a smell that stuck to you long after you left. As we tried to control the fire from the outside, I began to catch that same stench, the one I'd remembered from my previous calls inside. It cut through the smoke and the charred wood like a punch to the gut. At first, I thought I was imagining it, but one of the guys on my crew asked, "Hey, do you smell that?" And I nodded, just as unsettled as he was. I looked around and saw that the few onlookers standing by were wrinkling their noses, whispering among themselves. Whatever that smell was, it wasn't just in my head. The fire continued to rage, flames swallowing the house in a frenzy. But then, just as we thought we had it under some semblance of control, we started hearing sounds. At first, it was faint, like steam hissing from the wood as the fire drew moisture from deep inside. But the sound changed, shifting from a hiss to a low whistle, the kind you hear when a tea kettle's boiling. But this was no tea kettle. This was different. The whistle grew louder, almost insistent, and then it transformed into something else entirely. It became a wail. The wail was faint at first, rising and falling with the gusts of smoke, but it built, louder and louder, until it sounded like a voice, or maybe even voices, layered, mournful, almost pleading. It was like someone, or something, trapped inside the flames, screaming out to be let loose. I remember looking around, seeing the looks on my crew's faces. They heard it too. One by one, the onlookers started to peel away, eyes wide, some making the sign of the cross before hurrying off. I couldn't blame them. I felt the urge to turn and leave myself, even though that wasn't an option. And then, just as quickly as it had started, the wailing stopped. The night fell into a dead, unsettling silence. No crackle of burning wood, no roaring flames, just quiet. I thought maybe I'd gone deaf for a second. But then, out of the silence, the smoke began to shift. At first I thought it was just a trick of the light, shadows cast by the dying embers. But it took shape, clear as day, clear enough to haunt my mind to this very moment. A face, a devilish, leering face, appeared in the smoke, as if something malicious was looking out from inside that fire. And then, next to it, two smaller shapes formed, human shapes. My heart dropped. I knew exactly who those shapes might be. Both times I'd been inside that house, it had been for overdose calls. Both patients were beyond saving by the time we arrived. They had died in that house, 2 lives lost to addiction, surrounded by rot and decay. It's impossible to say how long I stood there, staring, my eyes locked onto those faces. I felt rooted to the spot, as if moving would somehow draw their attention to me, pull me into whatever dark fate had claimed them. And then, just as suddenly as they had appeared, the faces faded, dissolving into the smoke that spiraled upward and disappeared into the night. After that, the flames seemed to burn themselves out quickly, almost as if they had served their purpose. When the house was finally reduced to smoldering ashes, we looked at each other, shell-shocked, and not a single one of us said a word. It was an unspoken understanding. We'd all seen something that night, something that defied logic, something that made the hairs on the back of our necks stand up. It was as if the fire had been some kind of exorcism, a purging of whatever had lingered in that house all those years. The house was eventually bulldozed, the lot cleared, left empty. No one ever rebuilt on that ground. The neighbors said they didn't see or hear anything strange after that night, almost as if the place itself had finally been laid to rest. Even now, when I think back on it, a chill runs down my spine. Whatever was trapped there, it had finally been set free, but not without making sure we knew it had been there, watching, waiting for its moment to escape. I can still hear that wail sometimes, echoing in my memory like a distant reminder. Remember, if you want to support the show, head on over to our Patreon page. Your contributions help us keep the lights on, the stories flowing, and the time traveler fueled up for his next adventure. But hey, if you can't support us financially, no worries. Just sharing the show with a friend or rating us on your favorite podcast platform goes a long way. And if you've got a spooky story of your own, we'd love to hear it. Share it with us right here on Paranormal Nightshift. You never know, your story might just become the next chapter in the Paranormal Time Traveler series and told here on the show. Until next time, keep your eyes peeled for the unexplained, your ears open for the unheard, and your minds open to the possibilities.